Hello, my name is Maneka Helleberg, and I'm the chairman of World Freedom Alliance. And this is a start of a series of really lifting up and interviewing our beautiful partners and people within the World Freedom Alliance to get to know their wisdom and knowledge. And I'm very honored to be here with Robert today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, Maneka. Thank you. Yes, I guess my journey really started during World War II, which was some years before I was actually born. My father served in the Allied forces along with his two brothers, and unfortunately, both of them were killed during the war. My uncle Robert, after whom I'm named, was a prisoner on the Montevideo Maru, a Japanese prisoner of war ship. Was sunk, unfortunately, by an American submarine on the 1st of July 1942. And my father's twin brother was a wireless air gunner on a Beaufort bomber, and he was shot down over a bow in 1943. As a child, my father used to take my brother and I to the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne, which was the place where commemorative services were held for people in the services killed during the wars. And as a child, I just used to stand and listen to a chap talk about what had happened to my Uncle Bob. And next to me, my aunt, my father's sister, would be crying. And I think this had a profound impact on me, which I didn't fully realise until I got a bit older. And when I was 14, an adult in my life, I can't remember who asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I answered the question, well, I'd sort of like to understand why human beings kill each other and do something to end that. And I didn't have a sense of a job, but it felt like if you like, what I wanted to do, a vocation, I guess. And so I spent really most of the rest of my time at school and then at university seeking answers to that question: why are human beings violent? How can we end it? But wherever I studied that question, in whatever course I did, politics, economics, psychology later, and so on, sociology, the sort of disciplines where I thought I'd find an answer to that question, I never did. And I found that in itself instructive, because it seemed to me that seeing killing each other was such an industry among humankind, whether it's in wars or just through starvation, and particularly of peoples in Africa, Asia, and Central South America, and even sort of the criminal violence on the street. But also I became aware of, environmental violence and the sort of violence we experience through racism and so on. So it just felt to me like this was such a profoundly deep human problem. I was disappointed, I guess, but surprised too to find that there hadn't been, if you like, more serious investigation undertaken to sort of understand the answer to the question, why are we violent? And even people like Sigmund Freud and Albert Einstein exchanged letters back in about 1930 on the whole question of why war. But I don't think either of them felt they'd fully come to grips with it, and certainly not in a way that gave us the insight we needed to make a difference. So to cut a long story short, it's already fairly long, but so my life passion has been to answer that question: why are humans violent? What can we do to end it? And I've been doing that since 1966. So it's a while ago now.
And that's an important question. I mean, that is so important. I and I guess, it's not a surprise, but at the same time, it really speaks its own language, why this hasn't been explored more either. Because of course, maybe as you know now, and I've been working with Sasha Stone for a long time, and with the Earth Project, and they actually had a whole hearing in the ITNJ, International Tribunal for Natural Justice, about how the food industry, the war industry, and the medical industry actually go hand in hand, and actually make a lot of money on the wars that we see, on the the famines, the fear, and it's yeah, as I see it, if you keep a population in fear, if you keep a population in submission, and you have to follow orders, you have to just do what you're told, otherwise this and this and this and that will happen.
Yes.
People do crazy things, and you know, it just brings me back to because we're talking before, like what formed me in doing what I am doing. And I think it's not like just one moment that kind of formed this, but when I was young, one of the things that I did was that my father's a medical doctor, and in two periods he was a medical doctor in the South Pacific, on Samoa, Samoan
Right, yeah.
Islands. Yeah, so I was there with him for like some periods of time, and I got to experience this the culture there on Samoa, which I felt, you know, looking back, is very much like the original human nature, because it was so hospitable, they were so caring, so loving. It was a, you know, community feeling. Everyone was, you know, gathering food during the days and then meeting around the fire in the evenings. And I came in there, and you know, my father was away doing things, and I was running around with the kids, you know, swimming in the river, and you know, playing with the it felt like I got to experience this, you know, the original human nature and culture, which I've also experienced with the Sami people up north in Sweden.
Oh, yes.
Even though they've been so suppressed, they've been so harassed, it's a tragic, terrible story, like most indigenous people. But they're also, I always feel, you know, at home with with these indigenous people, with my friends up north also, because I think in the human nature is very caring, is very loving. So it's really a surprise, you know, when you, I don't think it is our human nature to kill each other, to go into to fear, and you know, it just doesn't rhyme, you know. What would
No.
you say about that, Robert?
Oh, I agree completely, Maneka. Nothing about all the research I've done has ever suggested that violence is inherent in human nature, and I'm very aware there's a number of authors who've argued that case, written books on the subject, but I just don't think it adds up. I mean, there's maybe one partial writer. It's just possible that a very small proportion of the human population is born with some, you know, incomplete development or defect, if you want to call it that, of the mind, but that's a rare exception. There's no question of that in my mind, because we can explain human violence in terms of the human socialization process, which is widely used and which has become more mainstream or dominant, if you like. And I think we've got the evidence you've already talked about of your own experience with Samoans, Sami people, much the same with a lot of what happened with Indigenous people in Australia. A lot of evidence of very caring, earth nurturing, relationship nurturing among children, adults, all across the society, to suggest that there's very little violence in a lot of these societies, and a lot of research has shown that too among, you know, tribes in Africa and elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I think
Would you
that
say?
we can put the blame
Yeah. So what would you say would be the key
on the
point?
socialization process.
Yes, in the socialization process to actually create violent human beings. What would you say are the key points? Like, what are the in your research, in your experience?
Sure. Well, because I'd investigated this from 1966, I'd done a lot of academic research and didn't find answers at all. And in 1984, I ended up seeing a psychologist because I wanted to get a better understanding about myself. And what I realized from that experience was that psychology did have something to offer, even if it wasn't necessarily being presented as overtly as I thought it needed to be done. But to cut a long story short, my partner and I, Anita and I, we went into seclusion in 1996, and we spent 14 years living just by ourselves out in the forest in the eastern part of Victoria in Australia,
Wow.
in a tent. And we spent 14 years, not all of that time in the tent, but the bulk of it. And what we did every day was just simply focus on ourselves, and we listened to each other. And that process would essentially entail perhaps something might have come up in a dream, a feeling or a thought or a memory, or there might just be a memory that had occurred. We'd talk about that a little, but particularly we'd focus on how we felt about the experience. And what we discovered after doing this full time for some months, and particularly by the second or third year, we had become extremely capable at digging into some very deep and very unpleasant feelings, unfortunately, and unearthed an enormous amount of fear, which you've already touched on, so crucial, but particularly also sadness, anger, and a whole range of other feelings from right across the spectrum, whether it was embarrassment, humiliation, just, variations on feelings that there aren't even words for in the English language, and I suspect not in any language. And they'd often manifest not even so much as what you might call an emotion, but often as just as a physical sensation in the body, And obviously fear can be both. It can be both, not both, if you like, a mental thing, but also a physical thing. You can, the adrenaline rush that might come with fear, for example. But the great step forward occurred for me on the 12th of November 2007. I was just lying awake one night, and I realised that a great deal of the violence that I had suffered in my own life as a child had come from things that you might see as pretty innocuous at first glimpse. And just to give you some examples, and I I described these particular feelings, this violence, as invisible when I first wrote about it, because the visible violence is the stuff we see. It's when you hit someone, you hit someone, you might scream at them, you might shoot them with a gun. You can do any number of things that are clearly violent from the point of view of the average person. But there's a vast category of violence that I labelled invisible, because the average person wouldn't see it as violence, and they wouldn't even notice it as a problem. And I'm just going to give you some examples. When you blame a child, condemn a child, insult a child, deride a child, mock a child, goad a child, be sarcastic with the child, embarrass the child, humiliate the child, shame the child, taunt the child, tease the child, snub the child, shut the child out, don't give the child help when it asks, give it help when it doesn't ask, give the child unsolicited advice, give the child, motivate the child to do something that you believe is important, guilt trip the child, moralise with the child, judge the child. All of these things have an adverse impact on the child. So if you blame a child, it'll eventually learn to avoid responsibility. If you condemn it, it'll learn to condemn others. Insult a child, it'll develop a low sense of self-worth and will learn to insult others, and so on. So what I realised from pondering that night, and then over many years following that, as I elaborated this line of thinking, was that the worst damage that's actually done to a child throughout its childhood is not the, if you like, the physical violence, and I'm not saying that's good, but it's all of these forms of what I called invisible violence. And in a document I wrote called Why Violence, I've nominated 232 of them.
Wow.
And that's 232 things that ordinary parents and teachers and significant adults in the child's life will inflict daily. Not all of them every day, but so a lot of parents might be in the habit of criticising a child or, humiliating it, whatever, any number of these things that look sort of small, but the cumulative impact is sort of death by 1,000 cuts, to use the expression that's sometimes used. So this invisible violence felt to me really important. But what I realised subsequently to that, and that took another year or two to really clarify this, was that there's another form of violence that's even deeper, and that's what I called utterly invisible violence. And this is the bit, it is beyond view for everyone. And this is simply all the behaviours that adults do that stop the child having the feelings that come from all this invisible violence I mentioned. So, for example, a child's been humiliated, or it's been shamed, or it's been snubbed, or it's been guilt-tripped. It's having an emotional reaction to that. It feels guilt, it feels shame, it feels humiliation, embarrassment, whatever. However, the child will immediately start to feel those feelings when it's mistreated with this invisible violence, but the adults will often respond by either ignoring the child, comforting, reassuring, or distracting the child, laughing at or ridiculing the child, terrorizing the child into not expressing those feelings, or violently controlling those feelings by hitting, restraining. Now, the net impact of this is the child suppresses how they feel about the original insult, the original violence. And because they're never given a space to feel that, all of this feeling is suppressed, internalized, so all this guilt is shut down, the anger is shut down, the shame is shut down, the humiliation is shut down, even the fear is shut down. And by the time a child reaches teenagehood, they're really incapable of feeling anything very powerfully. And to be honest, I think most children, by the time they're 5 or 6, have probably reached that point, because school, unfortunately, is not a place either where children are allowed to express how they feel about the experience, what they think or feel about their teacher, the subjects they're told to do, not from any choice. And so it gets right back to something you said at the beginning, and you were right on the ball. What we do is we socialise our children to be obedient and not to follow their own self-will. And the human organism, the human organism was born to follow their own self-will. Each one of us is unique. We have a unique destiny to fulfill, and the only way we can fulfill that is if we're, as children, given the space and supported to follow that self-will, so that hopefully once we're a bit older and powerful enough, we can follow it no matter who gets in our way. But in a society that wants a whole bunch of carpenters and technicians and doctors and nurses and philosophers and university lecturers and tradesmen and people who build ships and those who put cars together, what we're really doing is teaching our children to be obedient, to learn the skills that our society demands of them. And the problem is, if you don't do that, you don't get a job and you don't get paid. And so we're destroying a child's self-will to turn them into really a tradesperson that suits our society. And unfortunately, some of the people who end up with this sort of damage we've just been talking about, it's so extreme that they, well, for a start, virtually every child becomes an adult, becomes a parent, and then they inflict that same invisible and utterly invisible violence on their children. And we produce a society of people who are basically emotionally shut down, have lost any complete sense of their own self-will, their own vision for how the world could be, and their own capacity to even strive to achieve that. But they're very good at their job, which is invariably mundane.
Oh, sorry, is that me? Or is that you? Oh, sorry for that.
That's all right.
Had someone calling through.
No, I'm sure it's
so interesting, Robert. That's one of the main reasons I became a teacher. I'm a teacher in profession, but I stopped. It was 2 years ago because I couldn't be a part of this kind of what do you say? This apparatus just putting these kids in little boxes. Like, I wouldn't do it. I'm so happy. I had my own business, giving people clean water and everything. So I was so happy I could stop. I could just say, no, I'm not doing this anymore. But I think, that my reason for becoming a teacher was to actually you really support kids to stay in their nature, to stay as creative,
Yes.
free thinkers, and that question things. I remember, I worked as a teacher for a couple of years before I stopped. So I remember one of my classes that I was responsible of. It was like grade preschool 1-2, like a mixed class, and they were so brilliant, and they questioned everything, and they were like so good at handling their own relationships. I taught them to talk about their feelings and to solve their own problems, and so they were handling that.
Great.
They were handling that beautifully on their own, and like, okay, I think this my friend here, he's like that, I can't change him, so I'll have to accept that's the way he is, and help him, support him to understand. So it was so beautiful to see. But I remember sometimes another teacher would take the class over who didn't understand, how how they worked, and they came to me afterwards like, what is they're questioning everything. This is really, really tough, to have your class. They're just and I was like, yes, yes. And
Well
they were
done.
so happy, and I mean, they were so happy. So and that's what I really want to create again, a new good school system, at least starting here in Sweden.
Yes.
Because actually it's not schooling, it's just to call it like learning centers for everyone, like for grown-ups, kids, everyone. But one thing that comes to mind as well is the isolation that has been created in our society. That,
Yes.
looking at other communities, like the natural human communities, there's always lots of people around, and people are helping each other with their kids, and the kids meet a lot of different people. They have other kids around to play with, and then in the Western society, we're giving away our kids to a kindergarten. Of course, some are better than others, but it's like this in Sweden, for instance, they're talking about making it obligatory for kids to go to kindergarten from like 3 years of age or something. And it's the same, it's like this indoctrination plan that is being pressed on people. And also the parents, they're so stressed out, they're working, they're alone with the kids most of the time, just trying to make it work. Just stress level is up here, and of course, how can you be a good parent then, if you're completely stressed out, you're all alone, and you don't have a community of people that support you. In a community, if you need to rest, someone else is maybe making dinner tonight, or you're taking care of the kids so you can just rest for a while. Or I think that also the stress level in the Western society on people is just crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Shocking.
And then
And I
also
think
these ideals that are put out in movies, and like this Terminator, like you should be completely shut off and just like a robot. It's this kind of robot mentality that is being fed to us, which is not our human nature,
No. And I think that's the tragedy. And you describe well, I think a lot of Indigenous communities do have, well, really the tribe's the family. There's much more shared responsibility. There's much more sense of even the number of other human beings, including adult human beings, that any child will interact with, I think would have helped moderate any impact that, say, one violent individual might have had. Whereas when we trap our kids in a nuclear family, it's very easy to hide the violence of a father, perhaps a mother, but in such a way that it's just not exposed, and that child's trapped there for perhaps 15 or 20 years. And because of this invisible violence I talk about anyway, well, there's nothing to moderate it. And as you say, the pressure on modern industrial society, the pressure that society applies on everyone, parents, kids, all of us, it's a nightmare, so it destroys the natural human.
And but how would you say, how could we then, turn this around for people who are stuck in these situations, for people who are struggling and just might lose their temper, and because they're just so stressed out and so tired, and they don't know how to do it better? Like, what suggestions would you have?
Well, I think again, the first thing I do is make the information more available about what we're doing that's not working. Because I think, the average person, the average parent is taught to discipline their child, not to just love them and let them be free and so on. And you're under pressure to send them to school and to get them vaccinated and 100 other things. So parents at the moment don't have any, what I would call, accurate information about what their child needs, which is listening, loving, nurturing, support. If a child gets those, they'll turn out to be a pretty fascinating and terrifically powerful human being. So parents don't even have the info. But beyond that, I think you know this as well as I do, better than me from your own experience. We have to completely restructure society, completely from bottom up. And there's really not much of modern industrial society that I'd hang on to. I think anyone who's looked deeply into themselves or had a good look at the world knows that while modern industrial society offers you a lot of material goods, none of them, all of them combined, can't compensate for the loss of who you really are, your true self. Person who is born to be a free individual, who has self-will and does exactly what they want throughout their life. You cannot be compensated for having that taken away. And I think that's why we've got so many wealthy people in the world. They have been unconsciously taught to believe that accumulating wealth and goods will somehow compensate them for the loss of themselves. And it can't, but you can't tap off. So the wealthy people of the world are continuing to accumulate in an attempt that must fail to compensate themselves for what they gave away as a kid when they were terrorized out of being who they really were. And I think so there's nothing about this material world that can satisfy the emotional needs of the individual. So deconstructing it, making it more ecological in some form or fashion, that's probably a good mix between really traditional human cultures and well, obviously we're going to have to do a modern version. And I think your experience in eco villages and communities and what you're trying to create now is clearly the way to go. And to as I say, we need to add this awareness about the emotional violence we've inflicted on our kids and the deprivation of the love they've needed, and but also revisit how we're doing the whole learning experience. Indigenous kids learned pretty well. They didn't go to school. We all know that. And they were, I think, most of us have got models of Indigenous people that were very powerful, which have come even through this distorted culture that gives a very warped interpretation of Indigenous culture. But, we've got names of people, perhaps from our own countries or other countries, or even from movies occasionally, but Indigenous people knew a great deal about the value of human life and about the value of the earth. That's what we've lost. We've got to reclaim it. And I think we can only do it by unbuilding, deconstructing, whatever the word is, taking apart industrial civilization, going back to more natural communities. And I think there's been lots of models tried, and I think, I'm open-minded on that. I think we have to keep trying. Gandhi tried some, eco villages tried others, Tolstoy farms and places like that in Gandhi's case. But I think, again, the point is many people have tried different models, and I'd be willing to just say, have a go. But do everything different.
Yes, it kind of boils down to, I remember we had another conversation just the other day, and in the activist group in the World Freedom Alliance, where you're very active and you're taking doing a lot of good initiatives, but we talked about like 3 points that there were: to fight back while you create, and then also to focus on the individual. I think that was like so brilliant on what we need to do. So could you maybe go into what you think are do you think those three things could boil it down, what we really need to do? Or would you add something to that? Like where would our focus need to be now in 2022 and 2023? And this is also, of course, a part of trying to bring a lot of organizations and people in the freedom movement right now together to take aligned action to make sure that we become powerful together and make it happen, you know?
Yes, yeah. Look, I think each person, I just encourage each person to sort of decide to devote considerable and very conscious effort to understanding themselves and undertaking any healing they feel they need to heal. And some of us need to heal physically, some of us, and even if it's just from poor diets and, other problems we've had from a society that doesn't feed us well or give us good, clean water to drink and so on. So we've got a lot of physical healing. Compared to the average African who knows how to walk standing up straight, and most Europeans and Australians certainly have, most Westerners have forgotten even how to move well, so we've got huge amounts of physical problems, and I think we could devote time to that. But obviously, particularly given what I've said earlier, I think we need to pay a lot more attention to how we feel and give ourselves time to feel and express that. And I think if you're scared, we need to encourage people to feel that, not tell them it's not approved. I mean, boys are told you're not supposed to be afraid, you're not supposed to cry, but you're also told you're not allowed to get angry. And that's pretty conscious, So I think we need to be angry, we need to be scared, we need to be sad, we need to feel embarrassed, humiliated, ashamed, whatever we feel, and let ourselves feel that and learn, because those feelings are there to teach you about yourself. So I'd encourage every individual who's interested in building a better world to put time into themselves as a priority, emotionally, physically, spiritually, however you want to call it, to just be aware that you're a unique organism who is really, really important. You're the very center of your universe. And unless you can relearn to value yourself in a way that you were aware of as a very young child and had that beaten out of you, literally, you can never be all that you're meant to be. And I've written about this on a website Anita and I call Feelings First. Beyond that, I think obviously we need to be continuing to create the world we want. And I think that means elaborating our own vision of the sort of world we'd like to live in. And that can be quite micro, I want to live with these sort of people in this sort of location to do these sorts of things. And maybe you go looking for those sort of people and see if you can develop that shared vision with those people in the way you've been obviously doing for years, decades perhaps. And I just think that's really important. But at the same time, as I said the other night, we do need to be resisting the tyranny that really the global elite is trying to impose on us at the moment. And I think we can do that strategically in a way that means we can win, but we've got to mobilise a lot of people to participate. But try and see each of these three components, our own personal growth, the new world, the new earth we're trying to create, and the resistance we're offering to the old world and the tyranny that they're attempting to now impose on top of that, even as integrated parts of a whole. But every time we lose sight of the need to resist or the need to create or the need to grow ourselves, I think we lose sight of a key part of the picture. And that fundamentally undermines the success of all three parts. You know what I mean? So I think, people like you and I have probably spent most of our lives reflecting on how to do all these things better and well. That's why you've ended up in the World Freedom Alliance, because it's important that we've got to build this world of freedom, but we've also got to resist what they're throwing at us. And obviously you've paid a lot of attention to your own personal growth, and obviously that's been important even for you and your kids, and your partners. So I think one of the things I find that's not always easy to convey to people is that you can get too caught up in the need to resist and not pay attention to yourself, and including a need to have some quiet time, or you forget the importance of creating an alternative. On the other hand, it's very easy to focus so deeply on yourself that you lose sight of the world of which you're part. And pretty horrible things are being imposed on us at the moment. And if we don't resist them, I'm afraid, it's going to be very hard to both have our personal lives and create our magical vision. So I think, they're sort of, we've just got
I know you've been studying, civil movements and these ways of civil resistance for a long time. Could you mention that and what you've been working on? And I know we've also, spread it through the World Freedom Alliance, but I think it's really a good opportunity to really encourage people to take those actions that you have put forward. And could you talk about a little how those came into being and about the organization that you started, the We Are Human, We Are Free?
Sure. Well, I think because my passion since 1966 was always to understand violence and then to develop strategies to resist it effectively, one part of the journey critically happened in 1981 when I decided to learn more about nonviolent activism, and I did that essentially because I'd heard of Mahatma Gandhi. So being a keen student, I spent a lot of time in a library basement and read vast amounts of his collected works to try and get a clear understanding of Gandhi's own thinking on the sort of things we're talking about, resisting creatively, but also creating our world at the same time, and personal growth type stuff. And one of the things that really appealed to me about Gandhi was that he had a passion for non-violence as his mechanism for change. And for him, every human being was absolutely vitally important. So that the idea that you would kill or injure anyone in your efforts to make the world a better place simply did not make sense. One of his classic quotes is, goes something along the lines, if you want the tree to be the way you need it to be, then you have to plant the seed that's going to produce that tree. So if we want a non-violent world, we've got to be non-violent. And so he'd put a lot of effort into developing non-violent strategies, well, in his case, to liberate India, but he also spent a lot of time working with ordinary Indians as he travelled around India on themselves. So anyway, so I was deeply touched by his emphasis on the importance of non-violence. And then through the 80s, I was in a lot of campaigns, so the anti-war movement, a lot of environmental campaigns, and I was very interested in developing strategy, because one of the things I quickly realised was that a lot of social movements do not have much concept of strategy. They just think up something they want to do and then they plan it and they do it. But they don't necessarily have a look at how what they did today fits into some longer term picture. So I ended up spending several years researching strategy, and I read all of the great military strategists in history and the strategic thinkers like Karl von Clausewitz, but I also read Gandhi and other nonviolent thinkers. And I eventually wrote a book called The Strategy of Nonviolent Defence, the Gandhian Approach, and that explained how you could defend a country with nonviolence against a military invasion.
Oh, amazing.
But from that, by the time I'd understood that, I was starting to then apply it to social movements, which, as I said, if you look at social movements in history, very few have really been successful. The feminist movement's been very successful. The environment movement has been successful over time, but in individual campaigns, not so much. But the anti-war movement, for example, well, we've still got plenty of weapons and nuclear weapons as well, so not so good. So the problem is that if we're going to have the impact we need to have, we need to be strategic. And so that became a passion that, if you like, attached to my earlier passions as a kid. And so I wrote a book on nonviolent strategy, and then since then I've really been trying to encourage social movements to look at thinking and planning and acting strategically. And when this latest thing happened, this so-called virus, which I think many of us know doesn't even exist, certainly has never been proven to exist. This whole global coup d'etat by the elite against really all of us. I was very suspicious from the beginning. The initial actions way back in the beginning of 2020 didn't sound right to me. They didn't sort of gel. And so I was very quickly investigating, okay, where's the proof that virus exists? Never found it, of course, and plenty of good authors on that. But then I became interested in developing a strategy to resist this. And because I love strategy, I spent a lot of time on it. And I talked about it with Anita, my lovely wife. And we eventually put together a strategy, which we put on the website, We Are Human, We Are Free. And in essence, what it does is it identifies the key elements of what's taking place. A lot of it's to do with technology. A lot of it's to do with economics. A lot of it's to do with political power. And so what we did was we designed a strategy to defeat the major components to technological, political, economic, whatever, so that we could defeat this agenda. And the key things are just really basic. Some of them: don't wear masks or social distance. Staying human is more important than living in fear. Don't buy 5G or smart devices and systems. And resist all measures in relation to the fourth industrial revolution. Obviously, that's important because 5G is the basis of the surveillance and control grid they're going to create, which they're in the process of creating to control us all. Pay with cash and switch to community-owned banks. The people probably are well aware that the banking industry is undergoing a profound revolution, in effect. Catherine Austin Fitz is particularly articulate on this. But the effect of it will be that all of our bank accounts are jointly owned, in effect, by those who have very different interests to our own. So we want to encourage people to pay with cash, switch to the community-owned banks, and that way we can support local initiatives and defend our use of cash. Beyond that, and this is really important to emphasise, we must grow our own food, and this is particularly why our local community is important, because if we're not able to grow our own food, the ongoing destruction of global food supply chains, which is happening as we speak, will make us, probably by the end of this year, very vulnerable if we need to get our food because it's been government approved, and that's part of the plan. So we need to grow our own food and also join local trading schemes. Now, whether you're in a small village or a city or out in the bush and you're near a farm, make arrangements with local people to get the food you need. We would need to keep small businesses open and boycott all the large businesses as best you can by support the small and family businesses. They've been decimated in the past 2 years. We need to support them, and particularly the ones that are going to not insist we use contact tracing QR codes, which we should be refused to use as well. It's also important to boycott corporate and government media because they misinform and they censor. We need to support all those initiatives out there, the progressive news websites that are telling us the truth. And there's lots of them. We've listed quite a number on the We're Human, We're Free website. And we also reckon it's important that you don't pay COVID-related fines. Been a wonderful example recently, Willem Engel, who's obviously a powerful freedom activist in the Netherlands. He's been arrested. He's not the only activist who's been arrested, but it's pretty obvious he's sticking to his conscience. He's telling people the truth as he sees it, and he's not willing to submit. I think if we've all got the courage of people like Willem, we know that resisting this agenda is going to come at a cost, and we need to be powerful enough sometimes to pay that cost. I've been arrested about 30 times and jailed about 20. Mostly it can be an empowering experience if you use it as an opportunity to talk to arresting officers and jailers. These are people they're just human beings doing a job, and if we give them the chance to hear our side of the story and listen carefully to them, it can be pretty empowering and make a difference. And people can wear an orange armband, scarf or ribbon if they want, and that's just 8 simple ones which we've got on a one-page flyer. But if we get enough people doing that particular combination of things, and again, I emphasise as together they're strategically chosen, they will take away the power of the elite to control us. And that's why, for example, boycott all the corporate media. Don't use YouTube. Don't use Facebook. Don't use Twitter. Get on the progressive alternatives, banking, and so on. So again, these measures are designed to have strategic impact, because you can do a lot of things, and that's one of the great problems of activism, is deciding, do you do something that doesn't work, or do you do something that has a strategic impact? And quite often activists fail because they just do something that feels good, or they want to do it, or whatever. And as I've said gently, but understandably, I'm not against rallies, but in themselves, a rally is an appeal to a government that's controlled by a global elite, and that government is not going to do what you want. We've had 5 national presidents assassinated in the past 18 months. They were all presidents who resisted the COVID narrative. In fact, the president of Tanzania was a professor, had a PhD in chemistry. He was well aware of it was all rubbish. But he and 4 others have been assassinated, and governments aren't running this show. So when we have our rallies, which are great to mobilise people and empower people and make them feel good because they're with a community, which is important,
exactly.
We need to use that event to give people more impactful actions to do. Because the actions they take aren't going to make a difference in a strategic sense. They're really a waste of time, even if they feel good. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think you're so spot on, Robert. I think it's brilliant, and I would really encourage everyone listening to go to both your homepage, We're Human, We Are Free. Is it .org or .com or?
Yeah. We are human, we are free.org.
.org, yes, and we also have it on the activist pages in the World Freedom Alliance. And really take this seriously, really take those actions, because in the numbers, when we do this together, then we are powerful. That's the kind of, like you said, for the individual, because that's what I've been passionate about all my whole life, for the individual to know their power and know what kind of influence they can make. If everyone knew that, we could change it like this. Boom. We could change it so fast. And just look at me, my story and how the World Freedom Alliance came about. I was sitting in Sweden and I saw these big rallies, and my father's a medical doctor and has been very engaged for medical freedom for his whole life, basically. He was, at some big rallies in the UK, and he was getting engaged, and I just saw nothing was happening in Sweden, and no one was doing anything. So I was like, okay, no one's doing anything. I have to do something. So I was sitting there. Okay, the first rally we did was in Gothenburg. I think it was like 15 people turned up. I was having a, speaker, and it was me and Boris, another health medical, Chinese medical doctor, was speaking. And but from that, someone saw my speech for these 15 people and called me, and let's do a rally in Stockholm. And then so we planned a rally in Stockholm, and then it all came, through a series of events, that all the World Doctors Alliance and a lot of people that were forming the whole World Freedom Alliance came to Stockholm, and that's how it started. So just by, if I wouldn't have done that small rally in Gothenburg, this chain of events wouldn't have happened. So and that's like what you said, to plant the seed. If it's just a small action from the start, where you feel that it comes from the heart, it comes from, I have to do this, and you don't let your mind come in the way. I would say, just do it. If it's just to, okay, I'm really passionate about making a community garden. Do it. Just take action. If it's about supporting people who are feeling lonely or not supported in the situation, like I had heard someone in, I think it was in India or Pakistan, who felt so, he didn't have any community around him that understood him. Then he made a party, for people who are aware. Like, we need to celebrate. I mean, all these different aspects are, when all of us follow that spark, this human heart spark, and take action in those, that's the seeds that are then planted, that can grow.
Exactly.
And just like in Sweden, from that, we started the Swedish freedom movement, where we then had like, I don't know exact numbers, but we had the whole biggest square in central Stockholm full of people. Some say it was 40,000 people. It was one of the biggest rallies ever in Sweden. Just from that seed, and from all the events, all the amazing people on the way that also took action and also planted their seeds, and so on. So the ripple effects, and now with the World Freedom Alliance, we're in more than 40 countries. We've inspired even countries in the world to resist. I know presidents and that
Yes.
have been inspired by the World Freedom Alliance, and so you shouldn't ever underestimate these small
No.
seeds that you plant. Yeah,
I agree completely.
and also, I think it's so important. There's so many things I don't tell. I haven't really spoken about, but I've done a lot in my life, like you said, Robert. I've done very, very much. And one of the things, I was working for a coach for, I think it was 7 years or something, having my own business, because just for the reason that, if people are not aware and, can handle themselves, we can't make the choices and we can't make the changes. So that's why I also worked as a coach for many, many years. But during that period, I also collaborated with some researchers and with some universities around, consciousness and what it really is. And I got to do some research into brain science. Actually, I've been really interested in that, like how the brain functions. And one interesting part there that I think is really important here is that in brain research, you say that there's a silent area of the brain, which is the frontal lobe and the frontal parts of the brain, that in many people it's silent, like we don't use it. We don't use that part of the brain. But the funny thing, that the conclusion of the research that I did with these researchers, because they were looking at ways to activate, and what was this this silent part of the brain that wasn't activated in most people, and what was it about? How could it be activated? How could we use our full potential? And what kind of what things could we do to commit to activate that? And opposite to what is pounded out there in movies and everything, that intelligence is to be a robot and it's just intellectual and blah 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 blah, you should, that's what's told to us, that is intelligence. But what this research found was that the silent area, it is compassion, it's love, it's bliss, it's the being in a meditative state, it's being in thankfulness, being in full emotion. So the three main key points was to fully feel your emotions, to just like you said, to completely let yourself be, let yourself feel your emotions. The second thing was thankfulness, gratefulness, to be grateful and thankful. And the last thing was meditation, or to be silent, to be able to watch your thoughts. You could see like monks, Buddhist monks that had meditated for 15 years, they had a fully activated frontal lobe, they had a fully activated. And also people who go into this flow state, we just do things because you're passionate, because you do it with your heart. That's also when you use your full intelligence, your full capacity. So I think we need to, completely turn to, like you said, we need to rewire ourselves physically, even through like our brains. Of course, it's bigger than that. It's a spirit, it's our heart, to connect to that again. But I think when you, like you said, when you work on yourself so that you use your full potential, and you also take care of your family, take care of your community, you build the new, you don't wait for anyone, because we're kind of built in. We need to
that's right.
throw away that brainwash that we constantly need to wait for orders, that we constantly are kind of waiting around for someone to tell us what to do. We've been trained to do that our whole lives. Imagine if people would just do it without waiting, like how much action there would be. Like there's no authority that's going to tell you what to do. The World Freedom Alliance is not an authority. We have to make super clear. We're not going to come and save you. We're not going to do. We can lift up things that you can do to empower yourself. We can lift up things that bring us forward as a community, as a global community of actually family. To remember that we're family. So yeah, I could talk forever about this, but but
well, I'm enjoying listening.
yes, the point there was, because I think it was we had this leadership conference, or this amazing people in Sweden coming together just the other week, and we had a strategy session where we thought about strategy, and we had the, what do you say, liknelse, like the how to present it. It was as I can't find the English word. Well, anyway, how to make it clear. You could look at it like a fort in the Middle Ages, to say, if you have a fort, you have your family there, you have your friends, everything, and it gets attacked. There are people coming, with swords and everything, and they're coming to attack the fort. Well, some people need to go out there and stop them, right? You need to have some kind of action to hopefully peacefully, but you need to stop the people from coming to kill your family. And the second thing is, well, you need provisions. You need to have everyone needs clean water, clean food. You need the community inside to have what they need. And it's also a stressful situation. You need to make sure every individual, everyone is happy, taken care of, and that they feel and that they feel like they're taking part of, they're in their right place, so to say. They're playing their part of the bigger whole, and they feel a sense of meaning. Otherwise they're going to break down in that situation. I just thought that was a simple way of showing that, okay, this is what is happening. We're under attack from so many different ways, and but if we don't have the basics, we will just take out fires all the time, and not be able to go for the long run.
Yeah, I think it's an important part of any successful movement, and or just life, isn't it? I mean, you've got to be able to nurture yourself to run the long game, be there at the end, and make certain that what you've done personally in your life is what you wanted to do, but also hopefully been part of you helping to nurture the evolution of this new world we're in the process of creating. And it's not a short task, not a short-term thing. It's going to take time. But we need to be able to last the distance. And I think, as you say, we've got to nurture ourselves, and that's worth all the energy you put into it.
Definitely.
Tell me, Maneka, how did you could you tell us just a bit about how you and the World Freedom Alliance came together, and how that shaped and why you where you are now in the World Freedom Alliance, which I'm very happy about?
Well, like I said, it was kind of a natural chain of events that led to it. But basically what happened was that, like I said, I did this rally in Gothenburg, where Monica, my friend in Stockholm, said, let's do a rally in Stockholm. So me, Monica, and Lisa, who's now the secretary of the World Freedom Alliance, we planned this rally in Stockholm. We've already come some way in the planning. And then I went with my father to Berlin, because there was a rally there, and he was speaking, and I was maybe going to speak as well. And in this meeting, where it was Heiko Schöning that arranged it, and also through World Doctors Alliance and through the Corona commission that he started in Germany, where they did a lot of videos about what was really going on. So we came to Berlin and we did a series of videos, and we were at the rally. And then after that, and also through the conversations, some people, we were also in Trafalgar Square, me and my father, a month before that, I think it was like 40,000 people there on Trafalgar Square. And we met Dolores, we met a lot of other people, and it was the same people that came to the rallies, and we started to get to know each other, and we started to have very brilliant conversations about what really needed to happen. We kind of figured out that this is kind of a multi-level attack. They're attacking us psychologically, they're attacking us through the media, through medicine, through legal issues. It was all across the field. And the World Doctors Alliance, was a big part of forming World Freedom Alliance, because it had brought the doctors together. But we talked about, we also need to get the other professions together, the other fields like activism and psychology, all of this, because we need, as we are being attacked on all fronts, we need to push back on all these levels as well. So we had a conversation there in Berlin that ended with us agreeing that we should form an organization. We didn't have a name, we didn't have anything. And then I mentioned that, well, we have a rally in Stockholm, we've already planned it and everything. You can come to Stockholm, because Stockholm and Sweden was quite free and has been all the time. So people were like, yes, let's go to a free country. We don't have to wear masks. We don't have to social distance and everything. So it was a good place to start. And we also wrote a document. It was me and Dolores that started the document, and then of course everyone added to it. That was the original documents with all the ideas, all the thoughts from us there, how to move forward. So that's kind of the beginning of it. And then we arranged the rally in Stockholm, and everyone came there. And the day after the rally, we formally formed the World Freedom Alliance. So, and had the vote, how to organize ourselves and who should have the different positions, how we should work together, etc. So we formed the focus groups, like the different areas that we focus on, and we formed the organization and the board, and also the advisors to the board, etc. And we formed a core team that was like the founding people and the people that we really truly trusted to have the security of this core team that made the major decisions.
Good.
Yeah, so from that core team, we also then voted on the organizational plan and the economic plan for the World Freedom Alliance. After some discussions and deliberations where, some chose to not, they didn't agree with what was voted on. So some chose to leave there. And then we had a lot of other people joining. So it's, also in this kind of organization, it's, people come and go. But there is now, I think, a very solid core team. We're very solid in what we're about. And one of the things that we actually decided in the first meeting of the World Freedom Alliance was to make an action plan with short-term and medium-term, long-term goals. So from last summer, we kind of delayed. I think we're like the core people in the World Freedom Alliance were all under attack, so we had to kind of take care of ourselves for a while. And now we're kind of getting up to speed again, getting back on track, and that's why we're now forming the action plan, which is going to be, I think, a beautiful roadmap for people to see, like you say, how can I take action? How can I come into alignment with other people and actually make a difference? Because that's, basically what the World Freedom Alliance is about, to protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, and come together on many different levels to protect these freedoms.
That's great. no, it's a lovely model, and I think will continue to have impact because, well, as you say, it's about drawing people in, letting people work together, letting people play a role, and I've felt very welcomed since I joined, and yeah, I've been very happy to be there.
Thank you
It's
so much,
most
Robert.
people.
Thank you. And I think just like you said, I would like to throw that question out there for people watching. Like you asked me before we started, like what kind of made you actually do all those things? What kind of was there a moment? Was it something that changed or that gave you this passion to do this? And of course, there were many of them, but I would like everyone to ask themselves, like, what was the moment that made you passionate about what you're doing? Because I think that is what gives you the power to
Yeah.
move forward through everything. I remember because when I was younger, I was studying international relations and human ecology and self-sufficiency, how to build communities. And for one period I was in India for 2 periods and working in rural villages there, helping them to with an organization from Sweden together with what anyway. And I remember there was one point, I remember going on a train. It was to Bombay, like from this rural area. And I remember seeing these really, really starving children, like really skinny children. And besides them were sitting this woman. I don't think it was their mother. And she was really big. She was really fat. And she was just eating, while these kids were just looking at her, like, and it was like, she was kind of wanting to keep them skinny because they were going out begging or something like that. And that was one of those points where, like, okay, if we as humanity, we can't even take care of our children,
Yeah.
and we can do all kinds of things, all this technology, blah blah blah, what is more important than to take care of our children? Isn't that kind of the deepest instinct in our human nature, to take care of our children as a community? If we can't do that, then nothing else is worth it. And I think that's really one of my passions. Also, of course, this I had some spiritual awakenings when I was 14, where that was really deep for me, very clear that I'm here. I want to give as much as I can in this lifetime to this world, to bring it into balance again. But I think my passion for the children has been what has been the red thread through all of it. And then, of course, when you get your own kids, you want them to have a future. And whenever I just think about that, I can go through fire. I can go through anything. And I think if we all find that, what are we? Why are we doing this? What are we fighting for? Then we can make anything happen. If we just connect to that gives us power.
Agree more.
Yeah.
It's lovely, Maneka.
Yes, thank you, Robert. We've been talking for more than an hour now. It's been amazing. We could talk forever.
I think we could.
But I'm so grateful to have you with us in the World Freedom Alliance, and I'm so happy that we could take part of all of your wisdom and your experience and your stories. And I think this is, what we're about. Also, I think in human nature, to listen to each other's stories, to learn from each other. That's what we need to start doing again, to listen.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, Maneka. It's been an enormous pleasure for me. I've admired you from afar for a long time, so it's nice to spend some quiet personal time with you, even if others watch later.
Yes, thank you so much, Robert. Thank you so much.
Thank you.